Look at that. So welcome.
Olá, obrigada, Bárbara, por
Hi,
essa
thank you,
tão
Barbara.
carinhosa acolhida,
Thank you for this
apresentação. Quero
warm welcome
cumprimentar
and warm
a todas as
introduction.
pessoas que estão acompanhando aqui esse
Let me
painel
acknowledge and
hoje.
greet
Para mim é
everyone who is
uma
here today for
alegria,
this
uma
panel.
honra novamente poder
It's a
contar
joy and an honor
com esse
to be
espaço,
here with
contar com
this kind of
essa
space to talk to you.
possibilidade de diálogo, de construção
It's
de
great to have
alianças
the possibility of
internacionais,
having a
de
conversation with you
fortalecimento
and
dessa
building
rede
international
de
alliances
solidariedade
and
internacional.
strengthening
Então,
this network
novamente,
of
eu
international
agradeço
solidarity.
imensamente ao
So once
Projeto
again,
Portal,
thank you very
na
much
figura
to
da
the Portal
professora
Project,
Bárbara,
hereby
e também
represented
todas
by
as
Professor
envolvidas também que
Barbara.
fizeram
I'd
realidade
also
esse
like to
espaço,
thank
fizeram
everyone who
realidade essa
participated in it
construção
and who
desse
made it
diálogo,
possible
né?
to create this
Essa
space and
oportunidade de
foster
ter
this
esse espaço,
conversation.
de ter
The opportunity of enjoying this space
essa escuta, né?
and
Nos dá a
enjoying this
possibilidade de
opportunity
compartilhar
to
pouco
listen
do
to
nosso
people
contexto,
also
das
brings us the
lutas, das
opportunity of
resistências
sharing
e as
our
propostas que a
reality,
gente
our
tem
fight,
vivido
our
aqui no
resistance.
Brasil, num momento
It gives us the
extremamente
opportunity of
desafiador,
sharing the
né?
things we've
Contexto
been
de
going through
avanço
in Brazil
do
in such a
fascismo, da
challenging moment
extrema-direita,
with the
que a gente tem
advances of
visto,
fascism
infelizmente
and
não é
extreme right-wing
fenômeno
movements.
único e exclusivo do Brasil,
Unfortunately,
né? A gente
this
tem
is not
visto isso acontecer em
exclusive to
outros
Brazil.
espaços, em outros
We
países
see that
também, em outros territórios,
happening in other
mas
countries and
como
other
né, eu já
lands.
tenho costumado dizer, o
However, as we
Brasil ele é uma
usually
espécie de
say,
um laboratório
Brazil
para
is like a
essas
lab for
práticas
these
aqui se
things.
representam, se materializam
These are practices that then
no governo
come
Bolsonaro
to
e no
fruition in other
bolsonarismo, né?
places and which
Mas, ao
we've
mesmo
seen
tempo
take shape
que todo esse
during the
contexto
Bolsonaro
desafiador nos
administration and the
assola aqui no
Bolsonaro
país,
movement.
a gente
So
também
during
tem muita
such trying
resistência,
times
muita
in our
formulação de
country,
alternativas
at
e
least
de
we also
outras
see a lot of
narrativas que são
resistance and
desenvolvidas
new narratives and
especialmente
other
pelo movimento
narratives
negro,
that are
pelo movimento
now
de mulheres
being
negras,
developed
pelos
and
movimentos
written by
indígenas
the
e
Black
também pelos
movements,
movimentos
the female
populares.
movements, the indigenous
E a gente
movements,
teve aí
and the
a
popular
oportunidade em
movements.
julho de fazer um simpósio
In
também
July, we
aqui nesse
had the
espaço
opportunity of
do
holding
Projeto
a
Portal,
symposium
onde a gente contou
also
aí
through the Portal
um pouco
Project.
dessas experiências,
During this
né, do
symposium,
movimento sem
we
terra
also talked
e
about
também do movimento
experiences
indígena,
with the
além da
landless
presença também de
movement
Vilma
and the
Reis,
indigenous
Vilma Reis, né,
movement.
representando o movimento de
We
mulheres
also
negras,
had
que
Miss
felizmente está
Vilma
hoje aqui com a
Reis
gente,
talking
está
about the Black
novamente aqui
women
com a gente
movement
hoje,
then,
né?
and
Então
she's
todo esse
going to be with
espaço
us
ele
again today.
nos fortalece e contribui
Through
também,
these
né? Como eu
spaces,
disse,
we
para
grow
aprofundar essa
stronger.
solidariedade internacional
It
e
also
estreitar
deepens
esses
our
laços entre
international
todas as pessoas
solidarity
que
and it
acreditam numa
strengthens our
efetiva e
ties,
real
the
democracia
ties
alinhada
between people
com os
who believe
interesses
in a
da
true
população, né?
democracy in line with the
Além
interests of
disso,
our
faz com
population.
que esse nosso contexto, né, a gente tem infelizmente,
Furthermore,
inúmeros absurdos e violações de
unfortunately,
direitos
we see
e a gente possa ter esse
a
espaço de
number
compartilhar
of
essas informações de
absurd
forma que elas
violations of
ecoem
human
em outros
rights.
territórios
And
e façam com
through
que também
these
mais
movements,
pessoas
we
saibam
can
o que
echo
está
these and
acontecendo
show
no Brasil,
this to
né? Como eu
other
disse, em julho
people
desse ano a gente
so that
teve
more people
esse
know about
espaço de
what's going on in
compartilhar
Brazil.
essas experiências, essas
As I was
estratégias
saying, earlier
institucionais
in the year, we had the
e
opportunity
isso
of
foi
sharing
um
about
elemento
these
muito fortalecedor
experiences
para a
internationally,
gente
and
aí
this made us
concentrar
much
forças,
stronger.
né,
We
de
were
luta
able to
contra as
join
políticas
forces
fascistas e
to fight
genocidas
against
do governo
fascism
Bolsonaro,
and
né? É
genocide,
claro que atualmente aqui no
things that were
Brasil,
brought
né, a
about by the
gente
Bolsonaro
consegue
administration.
respirar um pouco,
Of
né?
course,
A
right
gente
now
tomou um
in
fôlego
Brazil, we're
aqui,
taking a
né?
deep
A gente
breath right
conseguiu
now.
aqui, nós, as forças populares de esquerda,
Our
conseguimos
popular
derrotar nas
forces,
urnas o projeto de
the
destruição e
left-wing
morte, né,
forces,
do
were
governo
able to
Bolsonaro.
go to the
Elegemos
ballots
Lula, Luiz
and
Inácio Lula da Silva,
overturn
como
this
presidente,
administration
em
of death.
uma
We were able
articulação
to
ampla
elect
que envolveu
Mr.
aí
Lula da
diversos
Silva as our
setores
next
da
president.
sociedade, né? Uma
This was a
diversidade
joint
imensa,
effort
né? Isso deve
with
ser
many
dito
different
aqui também,
sectors
de
in
forças,
our
tanto em
Brazilian
termos
society. We made
ideológicos, como
immense efforts
políticos,
for that,
pessoas,
both in
grupos,
ideology,
partidos,
politics,
movimentos.
people,
Todas
groups,
essas forças se
parties,
uniram
movements.
aí
We joined
para
all of these
conter
forces to
o
stop
projeto de
the
destruição do governo
rise
Bolsonaro e
and the
tirar
destruction brought
todo
about by the Bolsonaro
que representa
administration.
esse governo
We wanted to
Então,
overturn
teve aqui
everything that this
agora,
administration
no
represents when it's in
novembro,
power.
onde Lula teve
So in our October/November
mais de
elections,
60 milhões de
Lula
votos
got
contra
over
58
60
milhões de
million
votos
votes
do
against
Bolsonaro.
58 million votes for Bolsonaro.
Pequena, né, se formos
It's a small
avaliar,
difference
analisar,
if
mas
you
que representou
really
uma
go
vitória
through it.
fundamental.
However, this
Importante
small
ser mencionado
difference
também,
was a major
o
win.
governo Bolsonaro tinha toda a sua
It's important to
máquina
say this because
pública,
the Bolsonaro
ele
administration
desviou muitos
was
recursos
using
para fazer
every
campanha,
public
né, utilizou a
resource
máquina pública para fazer
to
campanha.
win. They
Isso
used
envolveu,
public
né,
resources for their
diversas
campaign so that they could win
golpistas,
again.
o uso desenfreado de fake news,
Many
o
efforts
terrorismo
to
empresarial, né,
implement
de
a
grandes
coup,
forças do capital,
fake news,
de empresas que ameaçavam, chegaram a
corporate
ameaçar seus
terrorism,
funcionários
with companies
para
threatening that they
votassem
would
no
fire their
Bolsonaro, o
employees if
financiamento
they
de
didn't
atos
vote for
golpistas
Bolsonaro. They
antes
were also
e
funding
depois
coup-like
das
efforts
eleições,
before
e
and
até o
after the
uso
elections,
da
by the
polícia
way.
militar
And
rodoviária
they
em
were
alguns
even
estados do
using the
país para impedir que as
military or
pessoas
the road
chegassem aos
police
espaços
in
de
some parts of the
votação,
country to
principalmente na região
stop people
nordeste do
from getting
país,
to the
uma
ballots,
região que, como a
especially in the
gente
northeast
costuma
of the
dizer aqui no
country.
país,
And in Brazil,
impede
we
que o
always
pior
say
aconteça no
that the
Brasil, porque tem
Northeast is always
forte caráter
stopping
progressista
evil
e onde
from
o
winning in
bolsonarismo
the country
sempre
because
é
it is a more
derrotado. Então,
progressive region,
mesmo com toda
and
essa máquina
Bolsonaro is always
institucional a
defeated there.
serviço
So
do
even though
bolsonarismo
Bolsonaro
para
was using
conseguir, para
every
eleger o
public
Bolsonaro, a gente
resource for its
conseguiu
re-election,
aí
we were
eleger o
still able
presidente
to
Lula,
elect
que
President
toma o poder
Lula.
aí a partir de 1º
He's going to
de
take
janeiro de
office as of
2023.
January 1st,
A gente
2023.
celebra a vitória, né? A gente quer compartilhar isso
So,
com
of course, we
vocês,
celebrate that
mas
victory,
a luta segue,
but
né? Os
the struggle continues.
Continuam, né?
We
Mais do
have
que nunca.
important
Vamos conseguir
challenges ahead,
derrotamos o Bolsonaro no
and we
poder, né?
defeated
Tiramos o Bolsonaro do poder, mas
Bolsonaro,
infelizmente o bolsonarismo
but
segue vivo no
unfortunately,
país, e com ele o
Bolsonarism
fascismo
is still
segue
alive,
sendo uma ameaça
as well
real,
as
como a gente tem visto
fascism,
aqui
and there is still
dia
an
após
important
dia.
threat.
Importante mencionar também que a
It's
bancada do
important to
Congresso e do
mention
Senado Federal
that the
saiu
caucus
dessas
in
eleições
Congress
mais
of Bolsonaro
conservador,
forces
então o país
strengthened
elegeu
during the last elections.
uma grande quantidade de deputados, deputadas,
A lot of
senadoras
deputies and senators
alinhados com o projeto de
were
extrema-direita,
elected who are aligned with the project of the extreme right and conservadorism. We are in a moment in Brazil where we are facing an extreme right that has gained momentum. So, as everything in Brazil, the scenario is quite complex, and anyway, we were able to elect more women, Black women, LGBTQ representatives, and also Célia Jacureabá, that was an indigenous leader elected as a federal deputy, together with Sonia Jajajara, that they are part of the indigenous caucus. However, we are in a weak position still, but despite of all this, we need to celebrate these victories, no matter how small they might be. So Erika Hilton was also elected. She will soon be with all of us, and all those were important victories. So within this very complex scenario, it's a very good reflection of what we have lived during these last 4 years. We will see how we can move forward in this dispute. We have an important challenge to counterbalance the radicalism with different methods
ter uma postura mais radical de
So,
enfrentamento também.
To promote
Porque
reconciliation
tão, né,
and
numa
dialogue.
situação, num momento que o
And
país,
we are in a moment
enfim, sofre aí uma tentativa de destruição
where
como nunca
the
antes vista
country
por conta desses
has
4 anos desse governo. Na
suffered
verdade, são
an
4 anos de governo
immense
Bolsonaro,
attempt
mas são
to
outros 2 anos de
dismantle
governo golpista,
democracy.
né? Então, foi desde o golpe contra a
So, since the coup
presidenta
d'etat
Dilma, que a gente vem,
of Dilma Rousseff,
sofrendo esse projeto
we
de
have
destruição, né?
been
Então, a gente tem uma
suffering this
população
project of destruction.
faminta, né?
So
Uma grande quantidade, milhões de brasileiras e brasileiras passando fome, especialmente as
have
mulheres
hundreds
negras,
of millions
né,
of
que vêm
people
sofrendo violências das mais variadas
living in
naturezas,
very
das
difficult
mais variadas
conditions, suffering
natureza,
hunger.
com a juventude negra também sendo assassinada
We
nas
have
periferias, nas
also
favelas,
violence
ataque
against
sistemático aos povos indígenas,
young Black
nós
population,
vamos
the
sendo
systematic
atacadas,
attack
direitos
to
violados dos
indigenous
povos indígenas
communities.
também, o desmonte da educação pública,
We have the
o investimento em
dismantling
educação,
of
saúde,
the
enfim,
public
são muitos os
health
desafios
and
que a gente tem
education
aqui, né?
systems.
Então, no apagar das
And
luzes,
so there are a
temos dito
lot
aqui,
of challenges
muitas
to be
são as
faced.
medidas que estão sendo ainda
And
implementadas, porque afinal de contas a gente
we are
ainda
still facing a
vive o
lot of
governo
the
Bolsonaro,
measures that started during the
aprofundando ainda
Bolsonaro's
mais essas
term,
violências todas que eu acabei
deepening
de citar aqui.
all these different kinds of
Mas,
violences.
apesar, né, de todo esse
So,
cenário
despite of all
desolador aqui,
these
dessa situação crítica,
critical
importante ver que
scenario,
o momento
it's
também
important
desafiador
to
e favorável, né?
acknowledge
Nossa tarefa
that
hoje aqui no
is
Brasil
still a favorable
reconstruir o
moment.
país.
It's an opportunity to reconstruct the
Termos
country
fôlego, né, de aprofundar essas
and
relações
an
internacionais,
opportunity
né?
to
Não apenas
strengthen
no âmbito
our international
institucional,
relationships,
né? Mas em
not
espaços
only
como
at
esse aqui que a gente está
institutional
hoje,
level,
né?
but
De
in
fortalecer
spaces
esse
like
laço
these
também
ones
entre
that an
movimentos, entre
attempt to
ativistas, né?
strengthen
Então, por isso eu
the
agradeço
connections among
imensamente
the
a
social movements.
oportunidade
So,
de
and that's
poder
why
ter
I'm
essa
so
voz aqui,
thankful for this
compartilhar essas
opportunity
informações,
to
essas
speak
ideias
out
aqui com
in
você.
this
E hoje aqui a
event.
gente, né, nessa
And
jornada, nesse simpósio, a gente tem aqui, né,
in
vamos
this
contar, vamos ouvir 2 mulheres muito
symposiums,
inspiradoras que
we
são
are
do
also
ativismo, da
going
luta, da ação, da
to
construção
hear
de
two
caminhos, né, que são
important social
companheiros na
leaders.
construção dessa
They
jornada.
are
A
also
gente
my
teve,
colleagues
como
in the
eu
construction
comecei aqui,
of all these new paths.
Engano, né, com relação ao horário, mas eu já estou vendo aqui que a nossa companheira
Had
Vilma já está
a
conectada.
problem in the communication, and we understood it was in another term. So we can start. We were thought to start with Erika Hilton, but she is in Congress, where she is leading a session in São Paulo, so she may join us after that event. So I would like to give the floor to Vilma then, while we wait for Erika Hilton for
Vilma,
her
você está aqui na sala, né?
to connect. Vilma, are you here? Yes, I'm here. Hello, hello. How are you?
Bom dia, boa tarde.
So good afternoon, welcome. So Vilma,
muito obrigada pela sua presença.
Thank you very much for
aqui hoje.
Joining us today.
Você realizou, né, uma campanha incrível,
made
né,
an amazing campaign
como deputada federal,
as a women deputy in Bahia, with an important participation of the Black women's movement. It was a very important political move. And now you are engaged in this transition period as a member of President Lula's team and as many other important figures, as Aniele Franco. So I would like to invite you to share with us your evaluation of the elections and the campaign and your participation within this transition team. So Once again, thank you for being here with
Olá,
us.
boa tarde.
So hello, good afternoon.
Saudações à professora Bárbara,
Greetings
a
to
todas
Professor
as
Barbara
demais
and
professoras que
to
estão
all
aqui,
the other professors
envolvidas
and
neste
activists
projeto.
that are
A
involved in
todas as
this
companheiras
project.
que
To
fizeram
all
diálogo
the
com a gente ao
fellow
longo desses
comrades
dias,
that have
Mia
engaged
Silva,
in
Lula,
dialogue
e
throughout
no
all these
diálogo mais
years,
formalmente com Cristiane Gomes.
especially with Cristiane
Eu estou em
Gomes.
Salvador, na
So
Bahia,
I am
no Nordeste
in
do
Salvador,
Brasil.
Bahia, in the northeastern part of Brazil.
Olha o tempo, ok. Senhor
Let
de
me check
todas
the
as
time here.
batalhas. Como já foi aqui apresentada no
And
chat, né? Sou socióloga,
it has
ativista do
already been
movimento
mentioned, I'm
de
a
mulheres negras no
sociologist, I am an
Brasil.
activist of the Black
A minha
women's movement in
organização
Brazil.
chama-se
My
Coletiva
organization
Maim,
is called
Organização de Mulheres
Colectivo
Negras para
Mahim,
os Direitos Humanos, em femenagem
Organization of
a
Black
uma mulher
humans
negra
in
que
defense
combateu
of
pela
human rights,
liberdade, que
to pay
organizou
tribute
lutas
to
a
a
partir da Bahia, que
Black
é Luísa Maim.
leader, that is Luisa
Também
Maim.
a Coletiva Maim faz parte
So
do
the
corpo,
Collective Mahim is a
de
member
coordenação executiva que aqui
of
a
the
gente chama
executive
de
coordination
da Coalizão Negra por Direitos.
of
Portanto,
the
nós
Black
estamos na
Coalition for
incidência
Rights.
nacional,
So
local,
we have also
nacional e
articulated
internacional,
at
principalmente nos
national
casos
and
que
international
envolvem
level,
violação
especially
de
in those
direitos
cases that
da
involve the
população
violation of
negra,
human rights of
nos casos
Black
mais
population,
direcionados para a
and
questão
also
dos
in the
territórios
cases
quilombolas,
related
dos direitos
to the
das mulheres
dispute
negras.
of
Dentro da
the
Maim,
access to
nós
land.
organizamos uma rede de
We also
defensoras
have a
negras.
network
Salve, Érica
of
Hilton.
Black women
Tudo bom, minha irmã? Seja bem
defenders.
chamada. A gente
Hello,
começou o
Erika,
vídeo
how are
agora
you?
pouco, viu?
Welcome.
Mas
We were
Cristiane
waiting
deu
for
todos
you.
os informes. Então, eu gostaria de organizar essa minha
So
breve
I
fala
would like
em
to
três
start
momentos. O primeiro momento
my
é em relação
speech
a
and
como
divided
nós
into
chegamos
3 sections. First, I will
a
address on
fazer uma ação
how
política
we
nos últimos
politically
30
articulated
anos.
in the last 30 years.
Eu vou pensar desde criar em 1992 o Dia Latino-Americano e Caribenho
From
das
the
mulheres
determination
negras, luta das mulheres
of
negras,
the
e aí a
day
gente
of
neste ano de
Black women's struggle,
completamos 30
and
anos desta
we
data.
now,
É ano muito emblemático
but it's our
para nós,
30th anniversary
para todos,
of
né?
the
Para
determination of this
as
date,
coisas que nos fortalecem, mas também para
and
outras
that is
coisas.
was an important
E
victory back then.
nesses 30 anos, é
So
importante nós
throughout these 30
lembrarmos que
years,
desembocamos em muitas coisas importantes no Brasil
we
que envolvem
made
a
a lot of
emancipação
important things
política e o fortalecimento dessas
that
batalhas.
impacted
Érica, só para
the
você ver que você tá aqui,
independence
viu?
and autonomy of
Muito
the
lindo.
Black women in
Do
Brazil.
lado a gente desembocou exatamente na marcha de mulheres negras.
We
Que
organized
foi essa
the Black
construção
Women's
política
March.
muito potente,
That was a very
que
important
tem documento
political
lançado em 2015
event
no Brasil, que,
and
como bem
that
diz
took
a
place
companheira
in
Lúcia
2015.
eu
As
penso
Lucia
que
Chavert
todos os documentos,
said,
inclusive, Érica,
I
que
think
estão
that
em curso,
all the
em
documents
construção, na transição
that
política
are
do próximo ciclo de
being
poder no Brasil, precisam levar em
constructed
conta
throughout
a
this
Carta da
transition,
Marcha, lançada no Brasil,
I think that
dia
we
18
should
de
include
novembro de
this
2015.
letter of
Essa é uma
this
parte.
Black Women's
A
March
outra parte
that
que
was
tem muito a ver,
written
né, quando a
in
gente sai com
2015.
as nossas, né, com essa e essa camisa, e eu vim com ela aqui de propósito, exatamente
So
para
I
dizer
am
o seguinte:
wearing this t-shirt on purpose.
existe Brasil
There
antes
is,
e depois da marcha.
we can
E o
say
Brasil depois da
that
marcha de mulheres
Brazil
negras,
was
que
different
mobilizou mais de
after
3
that
milhões
march
de
of
mulheres
Black
no Brasil.
women that
Nós
mobilized
colocamos de
over
forma
3
muito
million
enfática,
women in
pós-marcha, que
Brazil.
nós tínhamos uma
After the
questão
march,
a resolver no Brasil que
we
envolve
were
a
certain
representação
about the
política.
need to improve our
Essa nossa
political
ausência
representation.
no poder político
our representation in political terms after the political failure of
enquanto povo, é algo que está em pauta,
having
que está
white
sobre a mesa e não vai
men
sair
in
de cima
power
da mesa.
that are not
Esse
able
é
to address
bloco
our
da
issues.
nossa,
So
para a gente dialogar e debater mais aqui,
that is an
né?
important
Quais são as
axis
condições em
of
que nós
our
nos
debate.
encontrávamos? O que a gente
We did a
batalhou
deep
ao longo
analysis
desses
of the
30 anos.
conditions
E se
back
esticar para
then.
40, a gente consegue perfeitamente
And we
para
have
além
been
do
trying to
legado, a
address
gente acordou
that
um momento de
during
atuação
these
direta
30 years.
De mulheres como Lélia Gonzalez. Isso para a gente
And
é muito
we
importante.
have the involvement of a lot of important Black leaders, as Lélia Gonzalez. It is important,
na América Latina e no Caribe,
this
o
struggle,
que tem significado para nós
so
o
as
diálogo
to join
transnacional,
forces with other Latin
a
American
possibilidade de nós
movements,
estarmos construindo uma luta política
so
dentro e
as
fora do
to
Brasil,
build
e que
up
muitas vezes não há qualquer
a
compreensão
struggle
do campo da própria esquerda tradicional, que nem
that goes
se deu
beyond
conta,
the
né,
attempts
muitas
of the
vezes, da
traditional
potência do
left
debate
wing.
que nós estamos
It is
fazendo,
important to
dos
acknowledge the
processos que nós
importance
estamos
of this
liderando,
debate and the
para além
the
disso,
political processes
numa
that
situação
have been
muito
led
mais
by these
violenta,
movements
que é de não levar
in a very
em
violent
consideração
context
aquilo que
that do not take
está
into
para muitas
consideration
teóricas afro-americanas, mas que para nós aconteceu com muita força com esse
many
dossiê
situations
feito em
that affected
1995
the
no
Black
Brasil, o
population.
dossiê Mulheres Negras,
So we
e que
created a
esse
dossier
ponto de
called
vista,
Black
sob
Women,
o ponto de vista
where
das
we
mulheres negras, o que é essa nossa
reflected
luta sob o
our
ponto de
point
vista
of
das mulheres
view
negras. E é aqui que
regarding
a
the
gente
struggle
desemboca,
of
e
Black women's
portanto a gente
movements.
vem para esse segundo momento,
Therefore,
que é dessa construção,
that led
que é
us
no pós-marcha. Esse é
to a moment
esse é segundo
after
eixo
the
do
march
nosso debate,
where
e
we
terceiro
focused
eixo,
on
que é a
the
nossa
second
participação e
axis for our
intervenção
debate
nos processos
and
para
our
garantir
intervention in different processes so
a
as to
nossa
guarantee
entrada,
our
a
access
possibilidade da gente acontecer nos espaços de representação
and participation
e o que a gente
in
tem vivenciado, que é
the
mudar
political sphere
efetivamente a fotografia do
as the
poder
House of
no Brasil,
Representatives.
e a gente
We want to
sabendo
change the
qual o
landscape
sentido de
in
mudar a
Brazil.
fotografia no Brasil em diálogo
And so
com
as
as
to do
irmãs
that,
que
we
estão
need
em todos os
to
países da
strengthen
América
our
Latina e Caribe.
dialogue with our sisters spread all
Processo
around
com
Latin
menos
America.
governo, com poucas de nós
We
em
don't want
espaços de
as much
representação
government or
nos anos 90,
a government where we are not
nós
there.
experimentamos possibilidades ali na construção da luta e da
In the
rede
90s,
latino-americana
we saw possibilities in building up our fight in our network in Latin America and the Caribbean.
de adentrar alguns espaços.
We were
A
able to
própria-
enter
a
some
própria
spaces.
força do Brasil de ser a segunda maior
Even
delegação
Brazil
na
grew stronger.
na Conferência de Durban.
We
E
became the
como que
second
somos
biggest
nós, as
delegation
mulheres
at the
negras,
Durban
nesse
Convention,
espaço, e
and we
depois
saw
a gente
Black
vive
women in these
uma
spaces.
situação que eu considero
However,
de
after
profundo
that, we
refluxo,
went
que é
through something
olhar
that I
muitas vezes de que
consider
alguma
a
coisa foi
setback,
resolvida no Brasil,
which is
principalmente no
we had
círculo
the
de
idea
poder,
that a few
no
things
círculo
had
no
been
primeiro
tackled
ciclo de
and
poder,
solved in
Lula,
Brazil,
Dilma. Nós
especially in
entendemos
the
que com
first cycle
que com
of
o ataque
Workers'
frontal
Party
à
power
vida
through
das
Lula
mulheres
and
negras,
Dilma's
o ataque
administrations.
frontal às LGBTs, a matança,
We thought that
o
this fight
transfeminicídio,
head-on
o feminicídio,
against
a
Black
gente,
women, against
neste momento,
LGBTQIA
nos
people,
primeiros 6 meses
against
deste
women
ano,
was over.
699 mulheres
At the beginning of
assassinadas no
this year,
país, né?
699 women were killed in
Mas aí a
Brazil,
gente
4 women a
volta,
day.
Érica e Cristiane, demais companheiras
So
aqui, para
Erica,
olhar qual é a
Cristiane, and
fotografia
my
do poder
fellow
que nós
women here,
temos. Imagine que
let's think about the
9.892
overview of
mulheres,
power here.
né, disputaram as últimas eleições no Brasil.
Almost 10,000
Eu estou
women
falando,
ran
são
for
quase 10
elections in
mil
Brazil
mulheres.
this year.
E nós
Almost
vemos, né,
10,000.
como Cristiane muito bem evidenciado aqui no
And
texto de
Cristiane,
Juliana,
we can see
né,
this clearly
de
in
Juliana
Juliana's
Fontes,
text,
qual
Juliana
era a
Fontes.
situação nossa em 2016,
We can see our
né, em que
situation
nós
in
chegamos,
2016.
em que nós empurramos as portas do poder legislativo
We got
e que
here,
nós
we
fomos
pushed the
recebidas com
doors of
toda a
the legislative,
violência,
and
com
we
toda a
were
violência
met with
que
a lot of
inclusive Érica nos
violence.
tirou Marielle Franco, né?
And this
Mas com
violence,
essa
Erica
violência que fez
took
com que o
Marielle
Dani
Franco
Brioli
from us.
tivesse que sair do país por tempo,
And it
com
is
toda a
because of
violência em
this
que
violence that some people had to
muitas
leave the country
mulheres
for
que
a
estavam
while.
nos espaços de parlamento,
Many
e eu estou
women
falando
who were parliament
das mulheres
members,
negras, das mulheres
and I'm
negras
talking
trans,
about
eu estou
Black
falando das
women,
empobrecidas,
Black
daquelas que
trans
não têm
women,
parentes no poder, daquelas
underprivileged
que,
women, women
junto
who have no
com a
relatives in
rede de
power,
mulheres negras na
women who,
política
together
que nós
with the Black women
começamos a
in
construir
politics
em
network,
2020,
which we started to
todas
build
aquelas
in
mulheres que se
2020,
mobilizaram
all of
e que a
these
gente
women
disse, nossa, o que está acontecendo?
who
Eu me
decided to
lembro
fight
que
this
no
fight
encontro
were
em São
wondering what
Paulo,
was
numa
happening.
noite, em agosto de
I remember that in August of
2019, encontrando com Léo
2019 in
Cunha,
São Paulo,
Érica, a
at
gente
night,
sentiu qual era
we
o
met with
peso
Leo Cunha
do que a gente estava vivenciando.
and we
Foi
felt
uma
the
coisa incrível,
burden
né,
of
Cristiane?
what we
Aquela
were going through.
galeria
It was
lá em São
amazing,
Paulo, acho que é
wasn't it,
Metrópole,
Christiane?
lotada,
We
as
were at the
pessoas não tinham
Metropolis
onde
Gallery in
pisar,
São Paulo,
né? E
and it
qual
was
era o
bursting with
interesse? E ali
people.
tinha uma fala de Sueli
We
Carneiro que se
couldn't
traduziu
fit one more
naquele
person.
momento que a gente
And
está vivendo
Sueli
ali,
Carneiro
né? E que
said
se
something
traduz na própria
that
eleição
translated
de
what we
Érica
were
Hilton. Eu
going
queria te
through,
dizer, Érica, porque
and that
o
had
que
to do
Sueli
with
tinha dito
Erica
para nós
Hilton
na
being
construção da
elected.
marcha é:
What we heard
muita gente que está
when building
ligada na
our
transformação
march
política do
was that
Brasil
a lot of
não está
people who
afim
were
de ouvir
connected
mais
to
homem
political
branco.
transformation
Aquelas
in
pessoas
Brazil
querem nos
are no
ouvir
longer
e elas
willing
estão
to
ouvindo o que a
hear
gente
a
está
white
falando. Foi muito
Caucasian man.
forte
People want to
essa fala de
hear
Sueli
us.
Carneiro. E as
Sueli
respostas
Carneiro
estão
said
vindo.
that,
E qual
and
é a
that was
situação que nós
powerful.
temos neste momento em que nós
So let me talk
lutamos
about what we
para
have right now,
confrontar com
because
todas
right
essas
now we
mulheres
are fighting.
que disputam o poder político no
We are
Brasil.
trying
Isso é
to
muito
fight with
importante.
all of these
Muitas
women who are
companheiras e
fighting
muitos
for
coletivos de
political power in
pesquisa
Brazil, and this is
internacionalmente
major.
estão
Our
olhando o
fellow
caso do
fighters
Brasil
and
porque
international players are
ele é um
looking
caso.
at Brazil right now.
Opa, já falei aqui 11 minutos.
Oof, I've been
Ele é um
speaking for
caso
11 minutes.
histórico de que como que a gente tem tanta força na luta da
This is
rua e como
historical.
que a gente não traduz
We need
isso
to see
no
that
contexto
we
do
are
sistema
powerful on the
político,
streets, but
né?
we are
Essa era a
unable to
grande pergunta.
translate
Em
this power in politics.
1997, quando Michael
This was a
Ranchard
big
fez
question
livro
mark in
chamado Feira e
1997
Poder,
when
Luísa
Michael
Barros
Rancher
respondeu
wrote
a
a book
ele,
called
né?
Faith and Power,
Na
and
revista
Luisa
Afroásia,
Bancos
né?
answered his question in the
Resposta a
Afro-Asian
Michael Ranchard,
magazine.
né? De Luísa Barros, na
Luisa
Afroásia de
Barros was answering
1997, quando
Michael
ela disse:
Rancher
olha, preciso
in
prestar atenção no que está
1997
acontecendo no
when she
Brasil,
said, "You
né?
need to pay
Nós já
attention to what is
construímos
happening in
grandes
Brazil.
vitórias, né? A
We've
primeira
built
vitória foi
many
desmontar
wins.
o
Our
chamado
first
mito
win
da
was to
democracia racial.
dismount the myth
Nós nos
of racial
afirmarmos como
democracy.
maioria numa sociedade violentamente
We
racista,
call ourselves
misógina,
the majority in a
LGBTfóbica,
very
transfóbica,
racist,
quando a
misogynist
gente conseguiu a vitória das cotas para enegrecer as
society.
universidades brasileiras,
We
é
also had the
fenômeno
win of racial quotas
internacional,
to
e o
make our
nosso próximo
universities
passo
blacker.
será ocupar o poder
This is an
político.
international
Isso foi
win,
em
but our next step
1997.
is to
Luísa
have
Barros fez
political
esse texto
power.
histórico
Luisa
respondendo
Barrios
a
said this in
pesquisador afro-americano
1997
para
to
dentro dos Estados
reply
Unidos
to an
e conversando com o
Afro-American
Brasil sobre a
scholar
ocupação do poder
from the
político.
United States talking
Isso é
about
importante
Brazil
porque
when it
ano
comes to
depois,
political
Luísa
occupation.
fez
And this is major because a year later, Luisa led a project between Brazil and the United States called Race and Democracy in the Americas. Because democracy for us is an effort for all of us. And it is ourselves, Erica, Professor Barbara, Cristiane, it is ourselves who make up our democracy in the Americas, whether in the US, in Brazil, in Colombia, or anywhere else. The experience of Epsi Campbell in Costa Rica showed us that we are the ones who make up democracy in this continent. It is us who are able to push the traditional left to understand the worlds that are surfacing. And Erica, we always talk about LGBTBNQA+, and people say, well, what's the next letter? Well, I don't know, but we're going to have another letter because subjects are fighting to come up to the surface for air. And when they come to the surface, we're not going to back down because we are the daughters of the margins. And we know what's in the center of it all. And as we identify the images of power and control that want to hold us down where we belong, quote unquote, we are actually going to fight against this capitalist, violent project, and we are going to fight for freedom for everyone in society. We must remember we are fighting in Brazil, but we still have to take one last step for political representation. Luisa Barrios was highlighting that in this classical text, with Michael Renchard. They also talk about this in a text called Our Feminism Revisited, in a journal called Revisited Feminism. So we got to the march, and we got to the march when we were bursting. And we did this in a democracy with our institutions in place at the time. We had this march in 2012. On the 13th of November 2012, we had our first meeting in the city of Curitiba, and we spent 3 years mobilizing 5 million women in Brazil, and we got to 100,000 women in Brasilia. We built a historical letter delivered to President Dilma, who went through an impeachment in April of the next year, and she was elected democratically. There were many contradictions then. The Black Women March was the only march in Brasilia which was met with fascism. We saw 10 shots being shot to the sky, but we were able to dismount their efforts in front of the Congress. And this sent a message. Our message was that we were going to overcome all of them and that we were going to govern our country one day because this is the path we're building. Now we're going through another election cycle in Brazil after all of this that we went through. We lost Marielle Franco to a violent murder. We saw the houses of Black parliament members, Black trans parliament members like Carol, who had her house shot. We saw women like Vera Lúcia Martins in Joinville being threatened. We saw Aline Lombardo, a Black trans councilwoman in Brazil, being threatened. Eline Roballo went through all of this. All of these women and all of their powerful helpers met in a historical meeting in April of this year in the city of Salvador. We also invited women like Beatriz Gomes Dias from Portugal, We invited our fellow companions from Argentina and Uruguay. We invited our sisters from other countries, and we got politically organized. We are sending a message. We are saying that in the next cycle of power in Brazil, we need tickets with Black women. This is key for us. And Erica, we are going beyond parties. This is where we go beyond parties, and we get to a level of political organization where we can make sense of an election where almost 10,000 women ran in all of their diversities, but only 101 of them are going to be in a Congress of 513 representatives. We ran for the federal Senate, but only 7 women will make up the Senate until 2027. We were running for these elections in our states, and out of almost 28,000 candidacies, our female candidacies represent only 34% of candidacies. You see, I've got all the figures here. So only 34% of candidacies. But when we look at the picture of power in Brazil, we know that we still need long strides. Now, in my last minute, I'd like to say something else.
Também a gente vem num momento que a gente está saindo de uma crueldade, de uma pandemia em que nós mesmos
We are
tivemos que encontrar o
walking
socorro
out
para nosso
of a
povo.
pandemic.
And
we had to look for the means to keep our people alive. We have thousands of mothers that are now burying their children. We have mothers whose children have been assassinated. And they are raising the children of their children. I have also a nephew that was assassinated. I am helping in bringing up his children. This nephew that was so brave, that was just walking peacefully in the street with his trans girlfriend. But we never feel safe. And he was a victim of that violence. We no longer have him among us. He has not the chance to tell us his story. And that's the reason why we now have so many open wounds. I was reflecting on such an amazing political work done. But then how is it possible that situations like this happen? He was with his girlfriend, and it's not just about this naive love, but it's how we protect all this with our political power. When I saw my nephew,
ele chegou lá com ela, né? E eu falei, nossa, né? Nós vivemos uma etapa da revolução.
His girlfriend, I was so happy.
Toda essa revolução também suscita muito ódio.
It was a reflection of a revolution somehow, but all that also triggers a lot of hatred, a lot of prejudice.
Para que muita gente de nosso povo não tombasse.
We have to strengthen our people that suffer so much. And so our victory in this election is a sign of hope. When I see my sisters that will now be part of the Congress, as Sonia Washashara, as Erica, and we have the example of Benedita da Silva with her consultation to the electoral court. And also we worked on identifying the fraud perpetrated by the right wing. It is important that in the caucus we no have any case of fraud in the sense of using the quotas just to participate. So this opportunity for debate is one of our victories that resulted of the struggle of 30 years. As in the 1992, Benedita da Silva was almost elected in Rio de Janeiro after suffering so many attacks. Now we can say that we are ready to fight so many kinds of attacks as feminicide and the violence against the Black population. So, right to all of us, and elections will never be the same in Brazil or in Latin America. So, the elections of Sadikans in London and the re-election sends us a message of other issues that are affecting the world, and the empowerment of Black women is essential so as to being able to monitor all these processes. And of course, international alliances are key in these Afro-American disputes. These alliances with indigenous and Black peoples and all the sisters engage in this revolution. Thank you very much. It is always inspiring to listen to you. Vilma mentioned a lot of our leaders that paved the way in our political disputes. There is a moment that strengthens us, and we are going to keep on walking on this path that have been paved by Sueli Carneiro and Elia Gonzalez and so many others, and also with the process of Black Women's March that took place in 2015. It is an important moment in our history that gives direction. And in the institutional disputes that we are not fighting for, and so as to strengthen our struggle to defend the human rights and the rights of Black people, of indigenous people, and so on. So I would like to give the floor to Erica Hilton. We don't have much time. She is leading also the audience on human rights in the City Council in São Paulo. She was elected a federal deputy congresswoman and will take power in 2023, but in 2020 she was the woman most voted in Brazil as a city councilor. She's an activist of LGBTQ plus, and she is a very important inspiration to all of us. So thank you so much, Erica, for being with us today. We know that you have a very hectic agenda, and thank you for making yourself available for participating in this debate. And I would like to invite you to share with us your evaluation of the last elections, considering this intention of Black women to participate in Congress. So you are a very important representative of Black women that are occupying a space in Congress now. So I would like to share with us your experience in these spheres and in this dialogue with the Black community. So thank you so much. I am really moved to see you here all gathered and in these panels, and you that you are a woman that so much inspires. So how many minutes do you have? So I thought that I had just 2 questions, but now, okay, you have 20 minutes. All right. So it's not that I'm going to have 2 questions, right? I'm just going to speak about the elections. No, since we had these problems with time, and once again, I please ask for your forgiveness for this confusion about the time. So we are trying to adjust our times now. So I had another questions, but since the time we have, I don't know if you were going to be able to stay with us for a longer time. So you have 20 minutes. So I try to be brief in my answer, and perhaps we are able to tackle the second question. So thank you very much for the invitation. Yes, we are at the end of the year and we have a lot of activities. I was leading the Commission of Human Rights at the City Council, and now you are asking me about my experience in the present conjuncture and how are we fighting in the front line. We are as the Black women, the transvestite women that are at the front line so as to reconstruct this country, so as to transform the picture of power at present that does not reflect our actual society. It's important to take into these spheres our experiences. We have always been set aside from these spaces. We have been always dehumanized and being imprisoned in spaces that were subhuman as second-class citizens. And now, through the pain we suffer, promotes our fight to occupy this political space. Being absent in this space means the perpetuation of the genocidal project that oppresses us and denies the right to all of us. I was mentioning this earlier today. Brazil became, in fact, a place that is a huge threat to the Black women, to the native peoples, indigenous people. So, but anyway, this country has never been a safe place for all of us. We have been surviving throughout the history from the moment of the colony on. Brazil has not repaired all the damage caused by the colonialization, slavery. And so that's why we need to dispute that space in politics. And we need to speak up about all this situation and the need to pay for all this doubt, for all these offenses that we have all suffered. So that's why we dispute these spaces, and this dispute of our protagonisms for the transformation of this picture in power reflects the debate that we have carried out throughout the last years. Bolsonarism, that is much more than the Bolsonaro, it's an organized attempt of neo-fascism to paralyze the movements and attempts of occupation of those spaces by our peoples. So the hatred of which we are subject and all the violence, institutional violence that creates so many problems as drug dealing and so much. We need to face all these challenges. We have that shows our capacity of resilience, of resistance, our capacity of counter-attack this system. As we have done, we have been able to elect women, and being the woman that was most voted in the last municipal elections after having elected Bolsonaro speaks about the power we have to organize in the Black movement and to give answer to chaotic processes that threatens our life, our existence, our humanity, our right to enjoy life and have a decent quality of life.
This feat and our ability also helps us lift up these structures and make a move so that they try to silence us. And with them, we see an increase in hunger, poverty, extreme poverty, policies for women, policies for indigenous peoples, policies for the LGBTQIA+ communities, and the massacre of culture, the massacre of culture, the massacre of our connection with our elders, and the paths that we have traveled. This is why all of these sectors are threatened and tackled and dismantled. This is an effort to try and stop our fight, to try and stop our efforts. Now, when they are unable to stop us through hunger, unemployment, fear, violence, lack of sanitation, and the destruction of everything we have, because they are not fighting climate change, because this is directly connected to the lives of Black women. Because if you think about the climate crisis, you have a clear connection with racism. Think about the families that lose everything when we have flooding and extreme rain. It's not white Caucasian families in noble neighborhoods in Brazil. We're talking about poor families, Black families living in the slums, living on the hills. And when none of that is useful to stop us, then we see what Vilma mentioned. In the case of Marielle Franco, we have shots, we have guns, we have interruption through death. When they don't stop us through policies, they stop us through killing us. And it's important to remember that the world that most kills trans people is Brazil. So a Black trans woman walking through the front door of the Congress is something amazing. I was thrown out of my house when I was 14, a person who had to resort to prostitution to survive, a person who would sleep on the streets and is now going through the front door of the Congress. This makes me believe that it's possible to change things, and we are the living, breathing example of this change. We are the engine of the revolutions that we need in Brazilian politics and in the politics of the world. I know we see anti-democratic waves and coup waves all over the world, and these are popping up because they want to stop what we're doing. Sometimes when I am in the parliament and when I talk to my peers, I think that oftentimes they are looking at me and thinking about how they can organize things and plan ahead for me to be dead. Because my journey has been smeared with death. In my journey, there were basically no possibilities for me to be there. So they wonder, how is this woman here? How is she alive and breathing and by our side if we planned ahead for her death? You know, I'm under this impression, and unfortunately, I'm sure this is what they're thinking. This is how they look at me. And to answer their question and their wondering, yes, unfortunately, many of us, most of us, have been killed by this structure that they set in place. But we are still alive, we are still standing, and we are organized. We are organized with a very powerful train. We are organized with a train that is working in a number of different initiatives because, in spite of violence, in spite of hate, we are still there occupying these spaces. This is how I see this picture right now. We have a huge challenge ahead of us, and it's not only about overturning Bolsonaro, but the Bolsonaro movement and everything that feeds it. And the foundations of the Bolsonaro movement is racism, misogyny, hate against the LGBTQIA. And we are together, we are organized, we are working in a joint effort to reply to that, to tackle that, and to have our country understand that the political structure that we need 4 years from now, because by the way, Bolsonaro was overthrown now, but the Bolsonaro movement is still strong with the fascism that is now gaining power in our Congress and which is now smothering a more moderate right. The moderate right is losing space to a very extreme right movement, to a fascist right, to a right that is openly racist and against the LGBTQ community. And we must remember that the extreme right will keep on working very strongly in the next 4 years. And once again, it is up to us to fight that. We are the answer to changing this country. Of course, they are the picture of power, but they are not the ones rolling up their sleeves to change Brazil. They are not the one bringing the change. And we are in the front lines, and we are in the deep. We know we need to be in the front lines because if we're not, the next day it is our sons and our nephews and our grandsons that are going to die. We are the ones who are going to be killed. That's why we're leading the revolution. It's not because we're heroes. It's not because we're wonderful. Of course we're wonderful. Of course we're gorgeous. But this is not why we're fighting the fight and leading the fight. We're leading the fight because our lives are on the line. We're leading the fight because in this political scenario, we are the ones with skin in the game. Since forever, since we were brought to this land, we've had to develop survival mechanisms. We've had to dodge death, and death that was planned for us. We dodged death from slavery, we dodged death from the Bolsonaro administration, and we are now here together, planning together. And we've only been able to achieve this because we've done it together, because we understood that when we add our power together, we're able to change humankind. We're changing the path of humankind through our powers, through our mobilization, through our organization. I just remembered that they asked me to go slowly. I apologize. I apologize. Let me try and go a little bit more slowly. We have translation, right? But you know, it's so hard not to go extremely fast because we're talking about our scenario and our country and our challenges, and it's emotional. I start bursting up from the inside, and it's a big, big, big fire inside of me. And then I get excited. I apologize. And I also said I was going to be very brief, and I know that I'm digressing here. And Chris, I'm not even sure I answered your question. You were asking me what I think about this. But you know, I'm from an activism background, an advocacy background, and mobilized fights in the countryside. And now I am in the biggest House of Representatives in South America. And I see what I learned on the streets or on texts by Black women and on articles by women that I respect so much. And it's embarrassing even when I see these women admiring me, because I feel so small in this beautiful landscape of wonderful women who inspired us to keep going ahead and who showed us the way. I'm only here today and I'm only occupying this space and creating these policies because I had access to the thoughts of these women. Sueli Carneiro, Vilma Reis, Lélia Gonzalez, Angela Davis, Beatriz Nascimento, Farnon. Black scholars, LGBTQIA+ scholars, people who organized themselves and helped us occupy society as our elders did. I look at this scenario and I look at these relationships between political power, society, and people as a relationship that is also going to be tricky because Brazil is split right now. It is divided. And I'm not necessarily saying that people on the other side are fascists and want to hold guns, because we actually have a lot of Black people who are down in the dumps on the other side. And they actually have no idea what is happening. Our challenge is to reunite Brazil. We need to reunite Brazil through a positive lens, through hope, through love, through a fight to reunite all of us, not only Black women, not only indigenous people, not only LGBTQ people, but everyone. And I always remind Brazilians of that. Our population is everyone. And our fight is not only about ourselves. Freeing these peoples, these groups, these minoritized groups is going to free all of us. All of us are going to win. All of us are going to do better and be more equal when these groups make strides and have wins and consolidate the powers that we've been discussing here, powers that are still far away from our reach. Creating policies in this country is a challenge because we're talking about life, but at the same time, we have a gun to our heads. And I reflected upon something that I would like to share with you so that we can think about democracies and so that we can think about the role that women occupy in public life. Once I was talking about gender political violence, and I had an epiphany. I said, I'm more afraid, I feel more threatened, and I need to think and come up with protection strategies for my life now, way more often. And I was elected as the women who got the most votes for the House. Then, when I was 14 years old and I had to sell my body and go into the cars of men I didn't know, I was exposed to death. I saw many of my fellow girls dying in the corners of the streets, but I wasn't as afraid as I am right now. My freedom was not as contained as it is right now. I didn't have to hide my address. I didn't need a protection group around me all the time. And this is a red flag for me. It shows how frail our democracy is and the challenge that we have to tackle, because we have a gun to our heads if we are Black women. We have a gun to our heads if we are insurrecting. As Carolina Maria de Jesus says, we have a gun to our heads if we are bold women who dare leave poverty behind and who dare tackle white men who are in power or white men who feel in power and who are fighting for this power. Realizing that was actually impactful to me. It was alarming. And of course, I'm not ignoring all that violence from my past, but the violence from my past seemed, even though maybe it wasn't, but it seemed smaller and easier to manage than the violence that I face today as an elected woman with almost 247,000 votes for National Congress.
So this is the situation we are living. It's a very hard moment. They want to prevent us from moving forward, but they won't succeed. We will consolidate a new project for this country that is related to life, to hope, to transformation, to historical reparation, to the empowerment of the Black peoples, of the peoples living in the countryside, of wreckings, trans people from prostitutions where 90% even today suffer violence, to combat crack, to the militia, the genocide. Our struggle is about that, is to tackle the hunger that people are suffering. The hunger in Brazil has a specific color, a specific location, specific age, and that's part of a political project, because it is through the fear is that they control our minds and bodies. And that's our challenge, to stop that project and replace it with a new project. However, it's not new because our ancestors had this project. We are the continuation of that struggle. We are just moving forward with all those lessons taught by our ancestors. And I will conclude by saying that despite of all the challenges and despite the fear, that we feel we won't be silenced or intimidated or diminished. We are powerful, and there's not more powerful people that face hunger, state of violence, and genocide, because when we see our production, we are really on awe. We are surprised every day with all that strength, because death has been present in all my journey. I am 29 years old. I'm gonna be 30 tomorrow. It's gonna be my anniversary tomorrow, my birthday tomorrow, and but this will to live a good life, not to survive, just to live in plenitude, with exercising all our rights. That motivates me. And it's something they cannot withdraw from us. They can take away everything from us, but they will never take away our willingness to live a good life for us and for everyone, that the future is going to be marvelous, because we are the ones building it. We are the ones that wake up every day saying, yes, I am going to contribute to reach that future. I'm going to struggle to have a better future for myself and those that come after me, because our ancestors paved the way for us to be here today. And I want to build a better future for the future generations. That's part of the conjuncture, and I will conclude my speech here, and I commit myself just to open the path to the new generations, for all of us to live in a more egalitarian world. So thank you so much, and sorry for speaking so fast. So thank you so much. It's really powerful to listen to you. I am your fan. I'm part of your fans club.
Eu não consigo deixar eu não consigo fazer a mediadora imparcial, porque
I cannot be impartial here, because you're a very, very important motivation for all of us. It's really moving to listen to you and to have you here with us today. So I don't know if you can stay a little longer. I know, Erika, that you have to leave shortly, so I don't know if you would like to give some final words before giving the floor to Vilma Reis. I've always thanked my ancestors for giving me this opportunity here. We are envisioning the future we want with the Black women's movement. We can say that is one of the most successful movements in Latin America, in view of the genocidal project, of the death project we have faced, and the fact of being alive and of having been able to survive all this hardship and being able to recreate ourselves and create new political spaces. So we have that we see in the Candomblé temples, in the cultural associations, in the schools of samba, and in the so many places and spaces where Black men and women exercise our political power. And despite of all the challenges, we have been able to occupy
Então,
institutional
quero te convidar,
spaces
Érica, você
now.
fala sempre
So I
algo
would
que
like
muito
to invite you,
importante, muito
Erika. You always
interessante, que é essa noção do
say
hackeamento da política,
that we
né,
need
que é hackear esse
to become
espaço.
hackers
E
of the
desde que eu
political
tô falando
spaces.
aqui, eu faço essa
And
associação também com esses outros
that
espaços que a gente vive também, né?
reminds me of all the other
culturais,
spaces
políticos, que a gente
where
tá levando toda essa
we
noção
also
para esse
dispute
espaço também. Então, queria
our
que você falasse
political
pouco
space.
sobre esse processo de
So I
hackeamento
would
da
like
política,
you to elaborate
e também
on
se
this
houver
process
tempo,
of
que é algo que
hacking
preocupa muito a
politics,
gente aqui, a gente
and
sempre fala,
also
que
if
como
you have
defender e
time
como construir uma
also
rede de
to speak
solidariedade, de
about
defesa e
how
de
to
apoio
build
para
up
essas
a
mulheres negras que estão
network
ocupando
of
a política
solidarity
institucional, que
for
estão
the
colocando seus corpos à
Black
disposição
women
dessa luta,
that are
nessa
occupying
frente de ação, que é muito
institutional
importante, porque é isso,
political
nada
spaces.
mais
You
sobre
are in
nós
the
sem
front
nós.
line,
E é essa presença sua,
and
por exemplo, no
we are all
parlamento, que tem
here
feito
to protect you.
toda
So,
essa diferença, que tem feito
as you
toda
have just said,
essa...
you
que é
have
ato de
made a
desobediência civil,
difference,
bem
and it is a
do jeito
pure
que
act
nós, mulheres
of
negras,
civil
fazemos desde
disobedience,
sempre,
as
né?
the way we
Então,
understand
se
it.
você puder também, além dessa primeira
So,
questão
if
que eu
you can
coloquei, que a
also
gente quer,
comment on
né,
that,
ficar aqui o dia inteiro, mas enfim, como você acha que
how
a gente pode também, como hoje
do you
estamos aqui no
think,
espaço internacional, né, um
since we
espaço
are
de solidariedade
now in
internacional,
this
como que
international
esses espaços
debate,
fora do país
how
podem
these
contribuir também para fortalecer essa rede de apoio e de defesa
movements
dessas mulheres
and
negras que
organizations
estão
abroad can support
disputando esse
the
espaço,
work
né? Teve uma
of
pessoa aqui no chat
the Black
que
women
até, né,
disputing
já
this
tentando
space. There is a
otimizar ao
question
máximo o tempo,
here
que é a
in the chat
Crystal
box
Samaron,
of
não sei se eu falei
Crystal Samaron. I
corretamente
don't
o
know if
nome,
I
mas
pronounce
ela
your last name
pergunta, né,
well, but
como
the
as
question is
organizações, as pessoas, por
how the
exemplo, então, dos Estados
organizations and
Unidos
the people
podem
in the
se
United
unir
States
para
can
fortalecer essa
support
estratégia de defesa dessa ação
your
institucional das mulheres
strategy
negras.
in defense
Obrigada,
of
querida, mais uma vez.
the democratic expressions of Black women. Okay, well, they are just telling me that I need to leave, but well, I will try to be really brief to answer these questions. Of course, I would stay with you the whole day. You know, Chris, how much I admire you. You know, I feel such a respect and love for you because you also inspire me a lot. Okay, but let me answer the questions before leaving. So about how to hack politics, it's one of the strategies that is key in our war process because politics as it is does not give room to us. It just suffocates us. Of course, we will not be able to change things overnight because we are living in a very toxic place that puts us limits. So thinking about the strategies to just trick them to go around the system and that not necessarily follow the traditional rules, but on the other side empowers us. So there's so many politicians that are part of the privileged classes that they have no idea how they got there, just because they are part of a family. And they have no idea of the struggle that we have been through as Black women. They can not cope with our intelligence. We are really intelligent. We have to organize ourselves to hack those spaces that is organized to kill us. We are not here just for a picture. We want to be active in the construction of a change. We want to support the initiatives of our work. To hack politics is to show how necessary is to do away with this traditional way of doing politics. They need to understand that the aesthetics and the bodies that occupy this space is no longer the hegemonic one. We are not going to adapt to their roles. They will have to adapt to ours. So those that have the legitimate right to change the rules is us, and we need that transformation. It's not them that are going to keep on setting the rules of the game. So we will try to trick them as much as possible. We would like to do politics in our way. And we will see that doing politics, doing politics in the Congress not necessarily needs to be with a bill presented in a commission. We have thousands of ways of doing politics despite the laws. Of course, that is just one of the possibilities, but we have many more that we can take advantage of. And let me answer the second questions before leaving. And perhaps I'm not in conditions to say the way that on how international organizations can support us. I participated in an activity where it was mentioned by the different movements also in the visit of people from the UN Council team, so that came here to observe the elections. I found that initiative very important in that moment, so as to have a safe electoral campaign. And sometimes we feel so much unprotected and alone. And that's why we think that we will try to find a way of working together in a dialogue. All of us will have to think on the possible ways to create this support. Sincerely, I don't have an answer of what is the best way or the most effective way to protect and guarantee the safety of these women. Of course, any funds, any attempts to support them will be welcomed. But I think that there are many ways of expressing this solidarity. And I will just invite you to think about these possibilities of solidarity at international level. So please forgive me for leaving, but I need to leave. All my love and my appreciation for this debate, and I hope to see you in another opportunities and another events that are part of our struggle. I really enjoyed being here, and I hope to be able to sit perhaps in a bar just to do a toast and celebrate our existence. Thank you very much. We are together, and you can count on me for anything.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your availability. Thank you for your power. And thank you for your life. Congratulations. Happy birthday. Tomorrow's your birthday. Thank you so much for being here. I wish you a wonderful hearing. Thank you so much, guys. Bye, Chris. Bye, Vilma. Goodbye, Erica. Wow, listening to her is really inspiring. She's so powerful. She's so young. She's only 30. She's going to be 30 tomorrow. And we always say that Erica Hilton is one day going to be our president because we believe in the disruption, in this transformation that we've been talking about. This is something we've been following and striving for. All right, let me hand it over again to the masterful Vilma Reis. Of course, I have my comments and my questions, but I would love to piggyback on what Erica said. She mentioned this international network, and I think right now we are at the perfect place to talk about this. We can reflect upon how to build and how to strengthen this international solidarity network with an internationalist approach. In the Portal Project and the conversations with the Marielle Franco Fellows, Angela Davis also brought us food for thought on this at different points. She talked about the internationalist approach for political efforts and international efforts. We've been really pushing for this international front and this institutional front because for a long time we weren't able to occupy these spaces. They were not spaces to be occupied by us. And we have our role models like Benedita da Silva, Lilia Gonzalez, who fought for this space and who have been talking about the importance of occupying these spaces and these policies and transforming these policies for a long time. As Vilma also says, it is about qualifying Brazilian democracy and taking left women there as it should be, with a radical approach, fighting for the interests of the populations that are the most affected by these capitalist policies of hunger and genocide and extreme poverty. I'd love to hear your take on that, Vilma. So, in this mix of forces, what do you think about this international alliance and the strengthening of the solidarity network? In Brazil, the next 4 years will be strategic, as Erica was saying. We'll have tailwinds. However, it will be challenging as well because we'll be fighting and we'll be fighting for the narrative. And not all of the people on the other side are fascists. They have been co-opted by a certain narrative, a certain discourse, and we need to fight for them. How do you think an international network and an international debate will help? We've been occupying other spaces as well. We've been talking about building international networks. What would you say is their role? How would you say organizations abroad would be able to strengthen us in our journey?
Cristiane, eu penso que em muitos momentos várias questões
Christiane,
no Brasil, elas só ganharam força
oftentimes in Brazil, I think that things only gain momentum because we, in a way, create political embarrassment. We embarrass our politicians from the outside to the inside. This has always been key. We've been having affirmative policies for almost 21 or 22 years. And many of our leaders had these conversations because of other things that were going on in the US, in the UK, in South Africa. We used these experiences to create political tension and political embarrassment in Brazil. These are key factors. And in this political method, when we embarrass them, when we create an agenda, we can then say, hey, we must tackle this, we must solve this. Right now, we are scorched earth in Brazil, and we got organized to win these elections and to change our country. We have over 20 people here in this room today, and it's important to tell them that without Black women, President Lula would not have won these elections. Without Black women, without ourselves, without people from the Amazon, meaning indigenous peoples, Black people, and people going beyond the Amazon, people who were environmentally aware and socially aware, this narrative would not have won. We are at the front lines, fighting against the violence of mining, fighting against people who were looking for gold and diamonds in indigenous lands. We see these criminals trespassing maroon communities and lands, trespassing the lands of Black people who resisted after the abolition, people who stayed on their land, people who became the owners of those lands. And these are the best lands. And Christiane, at the beginning of our conversation, you talked about this fight. So let me tell you something. I am in the city of Salvador on the 4th of December. And by the way, this is a cover from the dossier on the 200 years of Brazil. It's called the Manifesto Brazil, or the Brazil Manifesto. And on this edition of the Cult magazine, I wrote about Oxóssi and the importance of this Ialorixá, this mother of Orixás. This woman who is so very important to us. I went back to the manifesto from 1983 to talk about it. So I would like to tell our fellow friends who are here that sometimes we think about international collaboration and international exchanges, but we need to think about religion and culture as well. So as I was saying before, on the 4th of December, in the city of Salvador, and Salvador is the eternal city of our ancestors. Salvador is the city where we planted our truths and our secrets from our ancestors. During slavery, this was the biggest harbor in the South Atlantic. So in Salvador, on the 4th of December, where we celebrate Yansan, and we do it publicly, we do it historically, and we throw a party to Saint Barbara. And on the 4th of December, the statue of Stella, the statue of Mother Stella, was burned. They set fire to it. So this tells us a lot about what we need to do. Many women scholars, activist scholars, Afro-American women looked at Brazil at a certain point, looking at sisterhood, looking at our religion, looking at our circles of candomblé. And we saw the absence of space. Think about it. We've had a long journey. We had a dossier about Black women from 1985 organized by our fellow fighter Matilde Ribeiro, and it was the first time ever that 22 Black women wrote together in Brazil. We also saw reports from Angela Guillen. She was in Brazil at the beginning of the 70s. Then, the national safety law prohibited us from talking about race. Melissa Nobles from the MIT in 1985, exactly when Sueli Carneiro, Luisa Bairos, Edma, Jurema Wernicke were writing the Black Women dossier, Melissa Nobles came from the MIT in Massachusetts to study 100 years of the census in Brazil. So Brazil is always in the epicenter of it all. And we're always trying to figure out how us, the majority, go through that. And this is key. It's important to say that these women who built this history were always fighting, and we are the numerical majority in our country. Right now, the census is going through Brazil. And in the first figures that we've received from this census are scary. So regarding this question, I think the first point is that the organized groups in the US, in the UK, in Canada, or elsewhere well, let me put it this way. We have capitals like Salvador, São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, São Luís. Are these capitals going to look for money in the agencies? Many of our fellow women have a lot of influence when they speak. And in 1982, we created the Latin American and Caribbean Day for Black women. And we said, hey, this is no longer feasible. We need to set rules in the scope of collaboration, in the scope of bilateral bodies or multilateral bodies. Because we can no longer keep on lending money to capitals like Salvador, these international bodies said. If people who were leading these capitals are not committed to transforming policies and making sure that policies reach Black women.
We went to Durban in a conference on racism and xenophobia and other ways of inequality in August and September in 2001 in South Africa, where the Black activists in the United States that created a lot of pressure for many organizations no longer continue with their practices, or we change the landscape of inequality because 1% of the rich white men hold 45% of the richness of the country. So we need to speak about this in the international sphere. Whenever we are in these international forums and we are debating like we are today, whenever we have an opportunity to occupy the spaces, even in the United Nations, out of all the UN agencies, we need to articulate and organize in those spheres. So whenever we have research groups interested in the Brazil politics and of other countries as Colombia and other countries as in Barbados, if we think we can see all the things that we have in common with Jamaica, with Honduras. We have a common agenda, and therefore we need to articulate to tackle these issues. In the 70s and 90s, political leaders as Benedita da Silva visited different countries, and even Abadias Nascimento, Lelia González, Abdias went to Buffalo, and Lelia visited other places for us to be able to organize international colloquiums, to expose and share and speak about the situation in Brazil. And so we need to put an end to the genocide and imprisonment of our youth, and also put an end of the economic inequality and inequality in terms of representation. Those are the flags of the Black Women's March in 2015, a march against racism and betting on the Buen Viver. Many of our territories are under threat. If we think about the Amazon and the environment, and we think about the traditional indigenous lands as Alcântara that are being occupied by American army, we needed to present a project for Black men and women living in Alcântara were defended in their rights at international level. And we see the right wing that in 2018 made an intervention in Brazil in coalition with other international movements. So, as in the Trump times, that use its connections for economic and political control. So we need to take space wherever we are so as to make room to our voices and our conditions, and also to engage in a dialogue in the Congress. For instance, in the case of Canada and other countries like Germany and Norway, that have gained trust again in the Brazilian organizations to defend the environment and to work for the climate change, or to protect and prevent the climate change. So we have to put an end of a world where only the white and rich men have a voice. We cannot keep on having these realities in Brazil. One of our proposals within the context of climate change, we need Black women and indigenous women having a say. If we are discussing international funds, we need to be part in that debate. We cannot have a monolithic view dictated by the traditional power. Sorry, I'm reading here. So we can no longer allow a small group of white men to dictate the rules. So just to conclude, Professor Barbara, let me say that when we are together in the political field, we are not speaking about alternative project. We need to operate within the centrality of politics to redesign the rules. I would change Erika's words of hacking politics into rewriting the political rules beyond the political parties, and also considering the ethical of the African religions of our ancestors and of feminisms. As Francia Marquez, that is also a part of this struggle as much as the traditional communities. We have a different ethics, a different way of doing things. We need to redesign politics. And in the same way as we pushed the UN to organize 3 international conferences on racism, we need to put an end to the killing of our youth. We have to create this focus of LGBTQ. Members. And we did a research about how white men and women made use of these different quotas. We identified a lot of corruption in all that. So we are producing a kind of knowledge that needs to reverberate in the different spheres as international organizations. Thank you very much.
Tá tudo certo, é sempre uma alegria te ouvir.
It's always a joy
falo isso sempre, que realmente
to listen to you.
Corre,
unfortunately, né? We have a limited time, and of course we can
aqui, né, com você, com todo mundo que
keep on talking for the rest of the day. But unfortunately, we need to close this
sobre como a gente pode aprofundar e fortalecer
event, and it was very important everything you mentioned about the need to strengthen this international network. As you said, Vilma, you mentioned the actions of the Black Coalition for Rights. It was very important for the last scope to create spaces to debate on the environmental racism. So there are some elements that I'm sure we can dig deeper in these international coalitions and how to confront these different kinds of violences, as these cases of fraud to get the funds, to appropriate from the funds that should end in black hands and that were spent on the white people that pretended being black. So we are organizing a lot of capacity building initiatives because collective action is essential in the political sphere. Representatives and the movements should work together and be in permanent dialogue. And we need to raise awareness on all these issues. So this was key also during the campaigns. So it's not that we are just, whenever we refer to the of occupying these spaces, we do not want to romanticize this action. We just need to reverberate these initiatives and also find new ways of doing politics. We are reflecting our policies used within our movements being transferred into the space of Congress. So in the last minutes, I would like to share invitations. The Foundation Maria Elio Francos, together with Rosa Luxemburgo Foundations, we did a research that is how to revert the destruction of the Bolsonaro administration that signals different initiatives to revoke some initiatives that were carried out by the Bolsonaro's administrations. There are some decisions that in the different non-democratic events as decrees and so on. So, and we need to relegate them. You need to put an end to them. And of course, we have different voices in the current coalition that elected the president, but we have a study that presents a debate that this document, I am putting this document here, and so here we listed all these initiatives that should be revoked. I'm going to leave them here in the chat box. It's in Portuguese, but well, we have the platforms that can help us nowadays. And please count on me if you need any further clarification about this research. So that was all. Well, time's up, and thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you, Professor Barbara, and all your team of the Portal Project. Thank you, Mia, Bettina, and everyone that assisted us in the logistical aspects. And sorry for the misunderstanding, and I am glad that we were able just to carry out this debate and to share our ideas. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Vilma.
Thank you.
She was in a meeting in the coalition and has just come back from a long travel. So thank you very much for being with us despite everything. So thank you, Barbara. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. Thank you, Vilma. You're always such an inspiration. And Cristiani, thank you for putting this together. It was so rich and so powerful. And Erica was wonderful as well. And so we look forward to continued solidarity and continued conversations. Thank you.